Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Our guest today on our Game Day segment is Michigan beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. Before we get to him, let's get things started with a few of my thoughts. It was another great season for Coach Beilein and his team. I was disappointed watching the Texas Tech game, though, because of the way we lost. I really don't think we could shoot that poorly again in a game if we tried to. I will say this, Texas Tech was the best defensive team I've seen in years, and their offense was better than I thought it would be, probably better than Red Raider fans expected it would be. But that's what I love about the tournament. You can't figure anything out. You have to be hitting on all cylinders, and of course you have to have some luck. That really does help. If we're being honest about this season, we knew it might end this way. It seems as if we went through these offensive funks each and every game this year, but our defense bailed us out along the way, while our offense did just enough. But we knew sooner or later, if you go cold, especially against elite competition, you go home. So it was on Thursday night in Anaheim. We went stone cold against a red-hot Texas Tech playing elite basketball on both ends of the floor. And that was it for another year. My guest today says he understands why Michigan fans are disappointed. The bar has been raised for Michigan basketball. Expectations have changed, thanks to Coach Beilein and what he's done. Beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News joins us next with his thoughts on another great season of Michigan hoops, here on The Michigan Man, in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Back with us on our Game Day segment to talk Michigan hoops, how the season ended, and what lies ahead for Coach B and the guys. Beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. Great to have you back with us, James.
Good to be back.
Well, we've had almost, not quite, but almost a week to digest Michigan's loss in the Sweet 16, and we know now they lost to a darn good Texas Tech team, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, Texas Tech, I think they probably weren't getting as much credit as they deserved. I mean, heading into the tournament, I know they were known for their defense. Obviously, they were one of the top-ranked teams. I think they had the top rating in defensive efficiency in Ken Palm's rating, and they were also third in scoring defense in the nation. And then the knock on them, I guess, was their offense. They weren't as good offensively as people thought they were. I mean, I think they were in like the low 30s or something like that in Ken Palm's offensive efficiency, maybe even lower than that. But yeah, I mean, just the game against Michigan, they just looked like a team that's capable of making noise, and I wouldn't even be surprised if they made it to the title game, just the way that they performed. And obviously they followed up that win against Michigan by beating Gonzaga. And I mean, if you look at what Texas Tech did in the NCAA tournament so far, they've held every single team they faced almost to their worst offensive game of the season. I mean, they held Buffalo to their season-long points. They held Gonzaga under 70 for like the fourth time all season. They held them almost 20 points under their average. They held Michigan to, their 44 points, their lowest point total, I think, since 2015 it was, I think, when they lost to Eastern Michigan. So, I mean, Texas Tech's defense is legit. I mean, I think they've proved that. So, and I honestly wasn't surprised. I think I was one of the few people that predicted them to lose, just because, as we saw in those first two games Michigan had against Florida and Montana, they kind of had those offensive lulls like they've had all season long, and they were able to withstand them. I remember in Florida they had the one stretch where I think they only scored 3 points over like a 6 or 7 minute stretch, and it was on 3 free throws from Jordan Poole. And I mean that they were able to withstand that, and it didn't affect their defense at all during that stretch. But against Texas Tech, I think you could see that all those misses were just kind of snowballing, and it started to affect their defense. And I think that's kind of what led to everything kind of just crumbling there, and them just kind of falling apart in the Sweet 16 to Texas Tech.
Well, you mentioned Jordan Poole. Jordan, after the game, said we picked a bad night to have a bad night. And as good as that Texas Tech D was, and it was as good as I've seen in a long time, it was just horrendous shooting, to put it mildly, from Michigan. And I know, again, give credit to Texas Tech's defense, but there were a lot of open looks that Michigan just missed on.
Yeah, they had several threes. If you think back at it, I think they had at least 4 or 5 that kind of rolled in and out. I know John Teskey had one, Isaiah Livers had one, Eli Brooks had one. It just seemed like no matter what they did, they just couldn't get a shot to drop. And I mean, I think if you go back to the stats, I don't think they even hit a jump shot until there was, I think, 10 minutes left in the game. Like everything they were getting was at the rim. And I mean, they finished 1 for 19 from 3-point range, and that 1-3 came on, you know, a clanker from C.J. Baird with like 22 seconds left that kind of just bounced off the back of the rim and in. It was just one of those games that it reminds me a lot of that game at South Carolina 2 years ago, when they just couldn't buy a shot to save their life. And it was just kind of the same thing in this game. And it is credit to Texas Tech and what they do. I mean, they clog the middle and they force you to kind of push it out or drive baseline. And like we said, yeah, they got plenty of open looks and they just couldn't get any to drop. But I mean, you look at the stats, only 4 guys scored for Michigan. I mean, I know they have a balanced scoring attack, but when you only have 4 guys score in your lineup, you're typically not going to win a lot of games. And I think, like Jordan Poole said, and like everyone was saying after the game, even Coach Beeline, they really picked probably the worst time of the season for them to have, you know, obviously one of their worst shooting performances of the season.
Well, I know fans are sad, disappointed, shocked by how the season ended, but really, if someone told me or a lot of us in November that this Michigan team would win 30 games and make it to the Sweet 16, I wouldn't have believed it, but I would have taken it. This was a really good season.
I think the thing with that is, I mean, I know the players, it was more so of a disappointing finish more than a disappointing season.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody in the locker room said it was a disappointing season. I mean, it's kind of hard to say that when you win, you have back-to-back 30-win seasons for the first time in program history. That's quite the accomplishment. I feel like it's disappointing in a sense that they came up empty, like they're not hanging any banners. They didn't win any titles. I mean, obviously, they had chances to do that. They fell in the, you know, Big Ten regular season title. They had a chance to get that when they lost at State in the regular season finale, and then they had a chance to become the first team three-peat in the Big Ten tournament, and then the lead kind of got away from them there in the final few minutes against State again. So I think it's disappointing in that sense, and I think a lot of it stems from just the start they got off to when they got off to the program record start, 17-0. I think that kind of raised the bar and it kind of pushed the finish line back for them and raised the expectations for everything. And we all know they were one of the last unbeaten teams left in the nation. They were just destroying everybody throughout the first 2 months of the season. So I think that maybe raised everybody's expectations coming into the season. But honestly, when coming into this year, I thought the Sweet 16 was maybe the floor for them. I thought that's where they should have gotten, and they did. But yeah, I just think I get it from a fan's perspective that it is disappointing in the sense just that they didn't win. You know, they're not going to be able to hang any banners. They didn't win any championships, and I think that more so also just speaks to the program and the standards it has set now, as opposed to, you know, when Beeline kind of first took over this program, when it was just the goal was just to make the NCAA tournament, whereas now the goal is to, you know, to compete for the Big Ten regular season title, compete for the Big Ten tournament title, and then compete for a national title, which, I mean, you think about it, they did all three, although they came up short in all three of those categories.
Well, looking ahead, and I know the college basketball season, of course, ends this coming weekend with the Final Four, but Michigan looking ahead, and fans are starting to look ahead already. We know Charles Matthews graduates in a few weeks, or he's on schedule to graduate. He's not coming back. What do you think of his chances at the next level, James?
Yeah, that's based on what a lot of the players say, I mean, you can kind of read between the lines. It seems like he's not coming back, although Charles, after the loss to Texas Tech, he didn't really come out and say that yet. I mean, he's kind of hinted at it several times. Although Coach Beeline pretty much said, like, yes, he's going to graduate and they're expecting him to go pro. So I guess that's kind of the foregone conclusion right now, unless barring some unforeseen decision or change of heart that Charles has, that he'll come back. But yeah, that's the expectation that he's gone. And I don't think his stock has improved any more than it did last season at this time. I think if you think back to last postseason, he was probably the star player for Michigan. He kind of carried them through that NCAA tournament. He was their most consistent player in helping them reach the national title game. But the problem with him was that he suffered that wrist injury early on in the pre-draft workouts, and that really kind of hurt him, and he had to cancel a lot of his workouts. And Duncan Robinson on a podcast actually alluded to the fact that Charles was going to leave if he didn't get injured. So I think that's kind of another hint that this was kind of his last go-around heading into the season. But for pro prospects, he's going to have a lot of work to do in, these pre-draft workouts, and kind of show teams that he can be this, one of these 3-and-D type of guys at the next level. A lot of, major publications, that do mock drafts. I haven't seen his name in any of these mock drafts in the past couple months. Not even, I think in ESPN's, top 100 prospects, I think he's somewhere in the 60s or something like that, which means he's, outside of the second round. So he could be a guy that, gets a G League contract and, has to maybe kind of show what he has at that level to maybe earn like, a two-way deal eventually in the NBA, or he can just, take the overseas route and go make money there. So, but I think he is, when you think about it though, too, his age, he is older. This was his fourth year of college. He's not getting any younger. And if you want to make money, you might as well, try to make it while you're younger, and, your pro career is not going to, last forever. So you might as well make it last as long as you can. So I don't know. NBA, I don't think he's going, I don't think he's going to be drafted in either of these first two rounds this coming in June. But obviously if he lights up, pre-draft workout, or he really has a solid showing and really, enamours the team, anything can happen. We've seen that. But yeah, I think he's probably going to end up being, taking a G League route type of thing, or taking an overseas deal, and then kind of having to try to work his way up to get a look at, the NBA from that way.
Iggy Brasdeikis and Jordan Poole might test the draft waters. I don't think we know for sure if they are or they are not yet. Do you think either one of them are really ready for the next level, James?
For Iggy, he got up to that good start. Obviously when Michigan played a lot of top teams early on in the season, and he pretty much showed that, he could play well against top competition, and he could defend, top guys. It's kind of tough for me to say. I've tried to talk to scouts, and really a lot of scouts didn't really want to talk to me, but he could. I could definitely see him leaving early. He's an older freshman. It's just one of those things too, where he's just going to have to kind of show what he has in these pre-draft workouts. But I think I'm not going to be surprised at all. I expect both him and Jordan Poole to declare early and to test these draft waters, just because how the rules have changed the last couple of years, where you can go and you can get these evaluations, you can get this feedback, and get these workouts in front of NBA teams. It's really, it just seems like, it's a no-brainer for them to go and do this. I know, Coach Beilein might have some hesitation for guys. If you have no chance of getting drafted, to even go and waste your time, because obviously they want to get their off-season workouts and programs, underway right away. Get these guys working with strength and conditioning coach John Sanderson, and not have them, waste time. That kind of maybe puts them behind schedule for these off-season workouts. But Iggy and Jordan both could. Like I said, weird things can happen in these workouts. Jordan Poole goes in a workout and just lights it up, and really catches the team's eye. He could, really garner some interest, and same thing with Iggy. But just based on their season, I think a lot of teams too, if you think back to some of the more recent guys that got drafted, like DJ Wilson, he kind of had that hot finish, and that's really what helped his stock. None of these guys have really had really hot finishes to the season, so it's really not that recency bias in a sense, that maybe could really catch a team's eye. I know, the thing with Jordan Poole is maybe his inconsistency, and his shot selection is a big word that's been popping up the last few weeks with him. And Iggy's been consistent. He kind of has his own flaws as well, about, reading, making reads, and kind of working off ball screens. And his 3-point shot it's improved throughout the season, but he obviously has his things he has to work on. But I expect both of those guys to declare, and just to test the waters, just to get feedback and see what the evaluations they can get. And I wouldn't be surprised if Isaiah Livers and John Teskey do the same thing too. It's one of those things where you kind of really have nothing to lose and everything to gain, in a sense, just to get, see what NBA teams think, and, get feedback on what you need to work on. But then again, also, maybe Coach John Beilein maybe has a different take on that. And, it feels like if a guy has no shot at, kind of garnering some sort of interest, or they might just think it's kind of a waste of time in a sense, and kind of makes them fall behind in terms of, getting guys on schedule for, their off-season workouts and kind of getting ready for next year.
No, it's going to be interesting 4 or 5 weeks to see who declares, what happens, because they have until actually late May to wait and find out if they're going to go in the draft or pull themselves out of the draft, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know the exact dates in front of me, but yeah, they usually have the deadline where they have to declare, and then usually they have 10 days till after the NBA Combine, which is in Chicago. I believe that wraps, I think that's from the May 14th to the 19th, so then I think they have 10 days after that wraps up to have to withdraw their name from the from consideration so that they can maintain their eligibility and return to school. So, I mean, there's still plenty of time. I mean, obviously, guys can declare early anytime, and then they can withdraw their name, anytime before then. Obviously, last year we saw with Charles Matthews, he waited until the withdrawal deadline to kind of take his name out. And then, Mo Wagner kind of made his announcement that he was going to kind of leave and hire an agent before then too. So it really just depends on the players, I guess, whenever they want to kind of declare early for the draft, and then I guess as to how long they want to stay in it, and kind of withdraw their name. But yeah, there's still plenty of time. We have almost 2 whole months, I guess, for this whole process to kind of play out. And I guess the one thing that helps with these guys too is that they're not I guess they have a little bit more time to think about these things and not be rushed, as opposed to last season when they made it all the way to the national title game and they're one of the last 2 teams playing. So I guess they kind of have that extra, week or so, or, a week and a half to kind of make these decisions, as opposed to when they did last season.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that Jordan Poole and Iggy test the waters and then come back, which I fully expect that they're going to, unless something very strange happens. But what does Coach B need to do here in the off season? And I know he's going to be trying to tweak next year's team, think about what he can do better. But what do you think he has to do to make this team more efficient, especially on offense?
Yeah, he got asked that after the last loss to Texas Tech, and I mean, he's just talking about how their numbers, their synergy numbers, they're just not a good one-on-one team when it comes to one-on-one situations. I mean, I think we've seen that all throughout the season, and I mean, the thing is though too, if they return all their guys, I mean, they're going to bring in. They have 2 incoming freshmen. They got Jalen Wilson coming in. They got Cole Bajema coming in, and then if Charles Matthews leaves, then that's going to be, barring any sorts of other guys transferring or anything like that, they'll return everyone else, and then they have the 2 incoming freshmen. So you're basically returning, your bulk of your roster, and this is a team that shot, I think, the worst three-point shooting team John Billings had since 2010. And I mean, obviously, it was one of the best defensive teams he's had during his tenure here at Michigan. But I mean, I don't know if the offense is going to really get a whole much better, to be perfectly honest, in one season. I mean, I guess the hope is just that guys are going to improve their numbers. Jordan Poole is just going to get more comfortable working off the ball and kind of creating his own shot and, creating plays off the dribble. Same thing with Iggy and ball screens. If he comes back, making plays for others and kind of making reads. And so I don't really know if there's, I mean, it is going to be interesting. I mean, like I said, you're going to have everybody back from a team that, was not one of his better offensive teams. So, and that's the one thing Coach Beilein always talks about is he adjusts to his team's strength and his personnel. And I mean, to a degree, I mean, he did that this year. I mean, obviously they were a defensive team, and he said that throughout the season. I mean, that's how they won the majority of their games, is leaning on their defense. But yeah, that's going to be the $1 million question with this team. I mean, I don't know if Jalen Wilson's going to come in and, be playing minutes right away. I know Cole Bajema, he has a deep shooting stroke, which he's known for. So there's going to be things that, Michigan's going to, covet. I mean, that they desperately missed this season. But as we all know, the big thing with freshmen is, I mean, you got to play defense. If you're not playing defense, you're not going to play. Because like we saw with Adrian Nunez, I mean, he's known for being a long-range shooter, but he played the least amount of the 5 freshmen they have, just because obviously there wasn't a lot of minutes to begin with at the kind of the 2 spot, but he probably also wasn't earning many minutes in practice. So yeah, I think it's going to be definitely interesting. I don't know how much John Beilein's going to be able to change with this offense, but like I said, I think you're just going to have to hope guys can just make a leap in their shooting percentages. You're going to have to hope Xavier Simpson just spends his entire summer shooting 3-pointers, and if he puts in the amount of work like he did for his free throws, and if he can get his 3-point shooting up, maybe to just a respectable, 35% or something, just so you don't have defenders sagging off you and kind of clogging the lanes, which is kind of what killed Michigan in a lot of games. Anytime Jordan or Charles would try to drive, the point guard would just kind of sag off and cut off that lane and disrupt the offense. There's a lot of kind of moving parts with the offense, but I think, just the biggest thing is they're just going to hope some of these guys, just from the off-season workouts, they can kind of just take that next step offensively and just kind of, you can see that uptick in their numbers. And then that will hopefully open a lot of things for their offense next season.
You've got to hope so. I know, as we've been talking about, Coach B said after the game, we were not a great offensive team this year. We don't have those one-on-one kind of players, which I don't think you necessarily have to. But the three-point shooting, I've always thought a shooter's a shooter. I mean, you can shoot and practice as much as you want in the off season, and you can improve your game. But shooters are just falling out of bed shooting. These guys that can really nail it, that's what they do all the time. I just don't see us with one of those guys right now other than Jordan Poole.
Jordan Poole is by far their most talented shooter. I think Isaiah Livers, he was their top shooter percentage-wise. I think he was the only guy over 40%. But yeah, you look at who else they have. Charles Matthews was he was kind of a streaky type of shooter. I think when you think about when it comes to threes, and Xavier, we know, he can kind of be a liability at times on the offensive end. There were times where it was almost like he was playing 4-on-5 just because defenses would sag off him and dare him to shoot. And then, to his credit, he made teams pay several times when they did do that. But yeah, it's just, I think that's the one thing this team was missing, was just its outside shooting. And you can just look at, the team that they had last season. That's where all that shooting went. You had Mo Wagner, Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman, Duncan Robinson. Those were, three of their top outside shooters, and they all left. And yeah, it's kind of tough to replace. And I think the hope is maybe that Jalen Wilson and Cole Bajma can come in and kind of help provide that spark. They're both guys that can shoot from outside. Maybe John Teskey can shoot better numbers. I know he's shown that he can hit the pick and pop five, but if you still look at his, I think he's still shot under 30% for the season. But maybe he can maybe shoot that at a higher percentage. And I think when you look at this roster, I think there's really not a ton of 3-point threats like they have. But then again, it's another thing too, like Coach Beilein said. When Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman, and he wasn't a volume 3-point shooter when he entered in his career, so it's one of those things too that guys got to get used to. Getting to do throughout their career. So I don't know, maybe, there's hopefully, I'm guessing the hope is that, a guy or two can make that step next season and kind of become that another volume guy. Maybe, Isaiah Livers, I think they need to play him more. Because like I said, he's probably one of their better 3-point shooters, and they need him to shoot as much as possible. I don't think Xavier Simpson's ever going to be a great 3-point shooter, but like I said, if he can just become respectable, in a sense, I think that kind of helps things. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they really have a ton of 3-point threats on this team like they had in seasons past, which is what, kind of, if you think about Beilein's better offensive teams, that's what they had. They had tons of 3-point threats and, kind of 5 shooters on the floor, but that wasn't the case this season, and it certainly showed at times on the offensive end.
It's been a very entertaining tournament thus far, heading into the Final Four this weekend, James. I think my favorite game, though, was the Purdue-Virginia overtime game on Saturday night. Man, the Boilers put on quite a show. They just ran out of gas, didn't they?
Yeah, I honestly didn't get to see much of the games. Outside of Michigan, I kind of caught the ending of the Michigan State Duke game. That was a back and forth battle. I think everyone expected. But yeah, it's kind of, I think the one thing, probably the one standout player from the tournament, was Carson Edwards. I remember when they were playing Tennessee, it was the ending of that game was kind of going on right before Michigan's game against Texas Tech, and they kind of had that playing on the scoreboard or on the video board, whatever you will, up at the Honda Center. And several Michigan players were watching that game kind of play out. But yeah, like I said, Carson Edwards, I could just see his stat line. It was pretty incredible. But then, yeah, the finish that Virginia had, it just goes back over the half-court line, and they get it in, and they just knock down the shot to force OT. It's crazy. If you think about this Elite Eight round that they had, it was probably one of the most exciting Elite Eight rounds they probably had in recent history. But that's certainly what fans like, and I think that kind of just speaks to, why it's March Madness.
No, I think we've been treated to some great basketball so far, and of course, this week we've got the Final Four coming up. You saw Texas Tech against Michigan. You've seen the Spartans 3 times so far this year. How do those two teams match up?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I don't think Michigan State will have as much trouble as Michigan had against them. I think because we know Michigan State's a better offensive team in terms of efficiency. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting matchup just because Texas Tech coach Chris Beard was talking. He had a conference call earlier today, and he was talking about how he tries to model his team kind of around like stuff that Michigan State does with playing with toughness, rebounding, being physical. I think it's going to kind of be a grinded out game. I mean, I think every game that Texas Tech has played so far has kind of been that, except for the Gonzaga game. I think Gonzaga kind of sped them up, but I think Texas Tech showed that if teams want to kind of play faster, they can score with teams as well. And I know obviously Michigan State's going to try to push the pace and push the tempo and maybe kind of get them running and maybe not allow them to get set. But yeah, that's going to be a grinded out game. I think that's probably going to be another game that's probably in the 60s somewhere. But I think just watching Michigan State, what they've been able to do this season has honestly been incredible. I mean, you lose two of your top three guys and you just continue to find a way to win. You win the Big Ten regular season title, you win the Big Ten tournament title. And I mean, Cassius Winston he's obviously one of the best players in college basketball. So if I was a betting man, I would probably put my money on Michigan State just because it seems like they have whatever it is you got to have. It seems like they have it in this tournament. But I definitely don't think it'll be an easy game. I think it'll be another kind of one of these grinded out games that kind of goes down to the wire. But I think Michigan State will be able to do enough to kind of knock off Texas Tech and represent the Big Ten and hopefully win Big Ten's first national title since 2000, something like that.
Yeah.
Michigan State last won it.
Well, and I think they have as good a chance as anyone because, of course, we all know you have to be hitting on all cylinders and you have to be lucky in the tournament. But the inside game, the outside game, the defense has been outstanding for Michigan State. And you mentioned it, Cassius Winston, he's the difference. He's playing just such impressive basketball right now. I guess I have to say, having seen everyone now that's in the Final Four, I wouldn't be surprised if they do win it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm like. It's just, you almost can't put your finger on it. Like, I mean, obviously this isn't one of Tom Izzo's most talented teams he's ever had. I mean, I think you could say last year's team was arguably more talented. I mean, they had 2 lottery picks and they couldn't make it out the first weekend. But, I mean, it's just something about this team. I mean, the chemistry, whatever it is, I mean, you could just see it from an early point this season. I think guys just they just have these established roles and there's just guys just kind of click. I mean, I don't think there's many egos on that team. I think everyone kind of gets along and everyone kind of knows their part. It's kind of one of those things where, the parts kind of make up the whole of this thing and kind of everyone just works together and it's been clicking, like I said, all season long. And yeah, I can't put my finger on it. I don't know if anybody can, but they just seem to have that it factor with this team that they can just win the whole thing.
Well, a last question for you, James, and we'll circle back to your beat Michigan basketball. And we, of course, have to wait a long time now for next season. And we've talked about the things that Michigan needs to improve. They need to, of course, get better from long range. Really, there's a lot of things they need to do. But would you say right now, and thinking Iggy's coming back and Jordan Poole's coming back and some talented freshmen, the Coach B is going to have the pieces to make another Big Ten championship run and be, a Sweet 16 team possibly next year again?
Oh, without a doubt. I think if you think about this season, I think more people probably would have been looking towards next season as the next kind of time for them to really make a run. I think this season, some people labeled it a rebuilding year. I don't know if I'd necessarily say that, but they're obviously a younger team. They lost a lot of experience from last year's team. Obviously, the main guys that helped them get to the national title game. But yeah, I think next season was kind of like probably what I think was going to be this team gearing up for the next big run, because you're going to have a lot of experience on the team. You're going to have several guys who are going to be, seniors. You're going to have a lot of juniors. You're going to have a lot of guys that have 2-3 years experience, starting. And I think that's the one thing they didn't have this year. I mean, you only had a couple 2-year starters in Charles Matthews and Xavier Simpson, and that's it. I mean, a lot of those other guys were all kind of bench guys playing, limited roles off the bench behind starters. So I think next year is definitely going to be the year where they can probably, make some serious noise, because like I said, experience is going to be the biggest thing that they're going to have next year, as long as everyone comes back. And then I don't think they're going to have as much a problem with their bench. I mean, we all know that was kind of one of their biggest weaknesses this season, is kind of getting that and kind of getting guys to stand out. I think next season they'll kind of have a better idea of, you know, who's going to be playing roles right away. I think they'll be able to play deeper from the beginning. So yeah, I definitely think next season is going to be one of these things where I think a Sweet 16 is probably going to be the floor. Like, I think that'll be like the worst case that people will be expecting, just because, like I said, they're going to be bringing back so many guys, and they're going to have all this experience of guys who know what it takes to kind of make deep runs and kind of make it through this grind of the Big Ten at making, you know, when they expanded to this 20-game schedule. So I definitely think that, I think, just me personally, I think the expectations will probably be, I think they would be higher than this past season. But then again, I don't know, obviously, how many people viewed it. I mean, coming off a national title game, I know obviously the expectations are kind of heightened coming off something like that. But I think, you know, like I said, Sweet 16 is probably the floor for next year's team, and definitely there should be a team that's in the hunt, that should be there in the last week of the season, competing for the Big Ten title.
And I agree with that. With us here on our Game Day segment this week has been beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. And James, you've been so very gracious with your time starting in December and then all through the season with your crazy schedule covering this team. I know our listeners love to hear from you. I enjoy your making yourself available to us so often. Again, we thank you, and we look forward to getting you back on Talking Michigan Hoops with you. Thank you, James.
All right, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew.
On Quick Hits today, spring practice is going strong right now, but there is not much news to speak of, and that's okay. There will be an open practice for fans this Saturday, 2:15 p.m. in the Big House. Next Saturday is the spring game, or practice, and that's going to be at 5 p.m. In the next few weeks, we'll get back to some football chatter on the show. In softball, we took 3 from Rutgers last weekend on the road. All-American Megan Bobian picked up 2 wins and is really rounding into shape. She is 13-3 on the season and has overcome her very brief early season struggles. We have Toledo at home midweek and a 3-game set with one of the best teams in the country this year, Indiana. We are 23-10 overall, 6-0 in Big Ten play heading into this week's action. Baseball continues their solid start. We took 2 from San Jose State at home last week, then another 2 from Michigan State as Big Ten play got underway. Sunday's game with the Spartans, though, was rained out. Like softball, we have Toledo midweek at home and stay here this weekend for 3 with Minnesota. We are 19-7 overall, 2-0 in Big Ten play. Don't forget our free show app is available in both the iTunes and Google Play stores. You can also hear us on iHeart, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. If you get the show from iTunes, please take a moment to comment or rate the program, and we thank you in advance for doing that. That will do it for another show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until next time, have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Take care, and as always, go Blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!